Okay, and welcome to JQuery Part 3, where you're going to be learning a ton of cool stuff. Now, if we take a look at where we last left off, you saw that we had our load element right here, and when we clicked on that, it dynamically got the div tag with the ID of box and embedded that in this page here. So we did an AJAX request, and it's very easy and very simple to do with JQuery. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean this all up. I'm going to delete the load file because we don't need it anymore, and we'll get rid of the CSS and everything inside the body tags, and I'll also get rid of all this JavaScript right here. Okay, now just as a quick side note, there is a quicker way to writing this. Okay, so we know what this is doing. It's basically waiting until the document is fully loaded and then it's running a function. Now there is a quicker way of doing it. All you have to do is say $, open the brackets, close the brackets, end with a semicolon, and in between there we're going to write function, and then in between those two opening and closing brackets, or parentheses should I say, you can put in the code that you want to execute. So that is exactly the same as what the other statement was, okay, well the other little script was, which is basically it's waiting until the document is ready and then running a function. It's just a quicker way of doing it, okay, and the only reason why I did it the other way was because it was easier to explain. Now let's take a look at how to count elements on a page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in an unordered list, and we can give it an ID. Let's call this we'll just call it list for right now. Not very detailed. And so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in some list items. So I'm going to open up my tag and say li, and in there we'll just say 1 and then do it like so, and then I'll just add a few more in there. Okay, so I'll add 5 in there. I'll change that to 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so I want to save this and I want to preview it. You'll see that we just have 5 list elements on the page. Now what I want to do is count those list items. So what I'm going to do is I'm first going to create a variable. This variable is going to calculate how many of those elements are on the page. So I'm going to say var for variable. Then I'm going to call that variable number. Now it's best practice to put a $sign in front of your variables, as you know. So now I know that this is a JQuery variable and not just a regular old JavaScript variable. And so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say equal that, and I'm just going to say, okay, we'll get all the li tags on the page, which is the list items. Okay, so we've got 5 of these list items. Okay, so and then what I need to do is say, okay, we'll calculate how many of them there are. So I've selected them all. Now what I'm going to say is dot size, open and close brackets, and end with a semicolon. Now at the moment it's not visible, but we can check to make sure that it's working by using the console.log. So I'm going to say console.log, and then I'm going to open and close brackets, end with a semicolon, and inside of there I'm going to write the variable that I want to log to the console. So that's going to be the $sign and number. That's the variable name. I'm going to save that. I'm going to go back to Firefox, open up Firebug, and go to your console, and then hit refresh, and you should see that it comes up with a number, and that number is how many of those elements you've told it to count. So if I was to add a few more in there, it should automatically update. Okay, going to keep doing that. Okay, save that, refresh, and as you can see it's now updated to 9 because there are 9 list elements on the page. So I've calculated that now. Now what we need to do is display that to the user. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a second variable. Alright, so I'm going to say var, and this is going to contain all the HTML, so I'll call this HTML. So I'll put the $sign in there so I know it's a JQuery variable. Then I say HTML, then I say equal to, and I'm going to create a statement, open and close brackets, and end with a semicolon. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a paragraph. Okay, so in quotation marks, I'm going to create my paragraph element, okay, like so. and I'm just going to say this page contains, then I want it to display the number, okay, which is the number that's contained inside of this variable right here. So what I need to do is go outside of the quotation marks, okay. Now the only thing that's inside of those quotation marks should be HTML, okay, or a string or something like that, but it should never be whenever you're putting a variable in. Whenever you're putting a variable in, it needs to go outside of the quotation marks, and then I say plus plus, and then in between those two pluses I'm going to say display the variable number, so I write the variable in there, okay. So this is going to say, okay, this page contains 8 or 9, and then I need to finish that off. So I'm going to, again, add some quotation marks in the end of there, and then I'm going to say contains so many li tags, okay. Then I'm going to end my paragraph off, because don't forget that it's not just a string, it's actually a paragraph, so you've got to end that tag like so. So now you can see that all the HTML is contained inside of those quotation marks, and everything else is outside of the quotation marks, and that is how you add variables in, okay. You always put the plus sign on either side, and then you put the variable name inside of that, okay. So basically all it's going to be a paragraph element that says this page contains, let's say, 5 li tags, okay. Now what I need to do is attach that variable, because again that variable cannot be seen until we attach it to something. Well, we'll just attach it to the body tag. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to select my variable, or call back on my variable by just writing the name, and then I'm going to say dot, so I'm adding my method in now. I'm going to say append to again, and I'm just going to append that to the body tag. Again, put that inside of quotation marks, and also end with a semicolon. Alright, so I'm going to save that, and let's see if it works. Okay, I'm going to refresh. You can see this page contains 5 li tags. Now if you want to space this out a bit, because obviously this looks like one big string, what I need to do is add some spaces in there on either side. So I'm going to add a space there and a space there, and now it should have spaced it out a bit better, like so, okay. So this page contains 5 li tags, and this method can be used for many things, for example counting how many blog posts you've got or something like that. Now there is a quicker way, a way that is definitely recommended. Not this way, the dot size method. You can use it, but there's a quicker one. What you need to do is say dot length. Alright, that is a quicker way, and it calculates how many of those li tags quicker, so you get the information to the user more fast and effectively. Now you do not put the opening and closing brackets on the end of there, okay, you just don't do that, you just say dot length, and then you save that and you refresh, and it does exactly the same thing. And if I was to add a few, or maybe take away a few, let's take away those, should only be 2 now left, okay. And so now it says this page contains 2 li tags. So that's how you can basically add up and calculate how many of those elements are on the page. Okay. So that method is definitely recommended. Now let's take a look at advanced selectors. So I'm just going to remove all of this, okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an empty class in CSS, okay. So I'm going to say dot, and then we'll just call this orange, and then I'll just say background color, and I'll make the background color a nice orange, okay. And you'll see why I'm doing this in a second, because what I want to do is identify what elements I'm selecting. Well, in order for me to do that, I'm just going to add a background color of orange to them, so you know which ones that I've selected, okay. Now what this is called is advanced CSS selection. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start my statement off, as you do, and in the quotation marks I'm just going to say, okay, li, alright, and then I'm going to say dot add class with a capital C, and then I'm just going to add that class of orange, okay. I'm going to end that statement with a semicolon, and we should get something like that, okay, where it's selected all of them, okay. Now let's say that I only want to select the first li tag on the page. Well, that's very easy. All you have to do is just click after where you've said get that tag and then say comma first. Okay, so I'm going to get the first li tag. Save that and refresh, and you'll see that it's only got the first one. And it's the same for the last one. You just, instead of saying first, you say last. Okay, that's really, really easy inside of JQuery. Okay, when I go ahead and refresh, you'll see that it selects the last list item. Okay, now I can also select odd and even elements, so I could say odd. Okay, and I'm going to refresh the page, and you'll see something interesting happen. You can see that it's selecting the even numbers on here, but that's not technically correct, because what it's doing is it's starting from 0. Okay, it's 0 based. So what we need to do is add in another list item, and this list item is going to be 0. Okay, I'm going to save that. I'm going to refresh. And as you can see, it doesn't select 0, but number 2, number 3, and number 5 are odd numbers, and they are being selected. So you have to remember that when you're using the odd selector, it is 0 based. And it's the same thing with even. Okay, that is 0 based again. So say even, and you can see now it's selecting the even numbers. Okay, and if I got rid of that 0, you'll see that it won't look quite right, because again it's 0 based. Alright, now let's say you want to get a little bit more specific. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, instead of selecting the odd or the even or the first or the last, let's say that I want to select this third one in the list. So what I'm going to do is, after the comma, I'm going to say EQ, and then I'm going to open and close brackets. Now in between those two brackets, I'm going to select which element I want to add the class to. Okay, so I'm going to select element number 3. Okay, I'm going to save that, and we're going to refresh. Okay, and it's selecting element number 4 because the EQ method is again 0 based. So what I need to do is add in an li tag again and have the value set to 0. Then you'll see that it's selecting number 3 because it is in fact 0 based. Now let's say that you don't want it to be 0 based, so I'm going to get rid of that li, or that list element that says 0, and I'm just going to delete that out. Okay, so what I'm going to do is say get all the li tags, then I'm going to say comma nth, which is nth, nth, hyphen child. Okay, and then I'm going to open and close bracket, and I'm going to select number 3. Now this is not 0 based, so if I save that and I refresh, you see 0 is gone, and it is selecting number 3. So this one is counting from 1, 2, 3, 4 instead of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So EQ is 0 based, nth child is not 0 based. So it's important to remember that. Okay, and you can select, you know, any element in there, any number, depending on how many you've got, of course. Now we're just going to take a look at XPath selection. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in an anchor tag in here, make it a href of nothing, and then I'm going to close that tag off, and then I'm going to add in another anchor tag somewhere else. Okay, so I'm going to say anchor href leading to nowhere, like so. Save that and hit refresh. Okay, so basically we've got 2 anchor tags, number 1 and number 4, and I'm just going to say select all the list items, which is li, that have the anchor tag embedded in them. So I'm selecting all the list items with the anchor tag embedded in them, which is basically number 1, which is that list item, and number 4, which is that list item. And I'm going to refresh. As you can see, number 1 and number 4 are selected. Okay, now let's say that I want to get a bit more specific. What I want to do is I'm going to add a title attribute to one of these. So I'm going to add a title attribute to the anchor tag, and we'll just call this red. Okay. So I'm going to save that, and I'm going to go back to my first script.js, and then what I'm going to do is say, okay, well I want to select all the list items that have got the anchor tag embedded inside of them, and then I'm going to say in box brackets, okay, so where you get your parentheses from, if you just don't hold down shift, you'll get those box brackets. And then I can say get the title attribute and make sure that is equal to box, or sorry, red. I don't want box, I want red, because I set the title attribute here to red. So that's what I'm checking for. So the only element now that should have the style applied to it is that element right there. So I'm going to save that, and let's refresh. And as you can see, only that element is selected, okay, because it's the only one that's a list item that's got an anchor tag embedded inside of it, and that anchor tag has got a title attribute of red. So when that is true, it's going to add the class of orange to it. So that's a bit of XPath selection. And again, you can take a look more at your CSS selectors. So just for a quick example, I'll delete this unordered list out there, and I shall create a div element with a class, and we'll just call this box, like so. And we'll create a table, just real quick, and we'll give that a class of box, like so. And what I'm also going to do is add a quick CSS rule in that, so I'm going to say dot, so create a class for box, and we're going to style that. We're just going to add a width and a height. In fact, we'll make it, well, I'll just finish that off. Make it 30 pixels, and we'll also add a margin in there. So we'll add a margin top of 30 pixels. Alright, and so what we have now is two of our elements. Oh, and we can also quickly add a background color in there so we can see them, like so. Okay, so we have our two little elements, and with JQuery we could have basically said, okay, again, start our new statement off, and we could say get all the elements with the class of box, and then we add a class to it, so we say add class orange. Okay, so it's going to get every element with the class of box, and then it's going to add the class of orange. Okay, so it's doing exactly the same thing. However, let's say that I still want the classes to apply to both those elements, but I only want to style the div element, okay, not the table element. So what I need to do is use a bit of generic but a bit of specific selection as well. So I'm going to say get all the div elements with the class of box. Okay, so now it selects only the div, and it only gives that one a class of orange. Okay, whereas with the table it only has a class of box. So that's important to remember as well. You can use a bit of generic selection with a bit of advanced selection as well, and that can help you target elements better. And the next thing we're going to take a look at is the slice method. Now I'm just going to go back and I'm going to delete out this box CSS class rule, and I'm also going to delete out all this in between the body tags. Okay, then I'm going to add an unordered list. Okay, and I can say a couple of list items in there, like so. So I can say 1. And then I'm going to keep adding that. And we can say 2, 3, 4, and 5. So I'm going to delete that out. And I'm going to refresh, and as you can see, we have got this from 1 to 5, our list elements. And what the slice method allows us to do, unlike the other methods, it actually allows us to select a range of elements. So what I'm first going to do is I'm going to start a new statement, like so, and I'm going to select all the list elements inside of there, and I'm going to add a class to those of orange again, and end that statement with a semicolon as you do, and hit refresh. Okay, so now you can see that it's selecting all of the list elements on the page. Now what I can do is add a slice method in there. So just before the add class, I'm just going to say dot, and then I'm going to say slice, okay, open and close brackets, and in between there I'm just going to say 2, okay. So what it's going to do is it's going to select it from the second one down. So I'm going to hit refresh, and you see that it's selected number 3, okay. And again, this is 0 base, so slice is 0 base. So what I need to do is copy that and just add in another list item and set that to 0. Hit refresh. And now you can see that it's selecting number 2 because the slice method is 0 based, and it's selecting everything down from that first value that I set. Okay. You can also define an ending value, of course. So what I need to do is put a comma in there, and now I select the ending value. So I'm going to say the ending value is going to be 5. Okay. So I'm going to save that, and I'm going to refresh. And you'll see something interesting happen. It selects number 2, number 3, number 4, but it leaves number 5. And that's because the end, wherever the end of your slice is, okay, it doesn't style the last one. It styles the one before it. So it styles the first one all the way up until the last one. And the very, very last one that you select does not get the style added to it. Okay, so number 5 doesn't get the style, but everything before that does. If I were to set that to 4, okay, only 3 and 2 will be styled, like so. So I can hit refresh, and as you can see, it's got number 2 and number 3. Now let's say that I've got a really big list. Okay, I'm going to add in a few more elements. Okay, now imagine I had 200 or 300 of these list items, something crazy. Okay, I'm just going to say 6, 7, 8, and 9. And if I go ahead and refresh, you'll see that it's still selecting my range. But let's say that I want to select it from the bottom up, not the top down. Well, I have to use negative numbers, okay? So what I need to do is, you're probably going, well, you just change it to negative numbers. So I'll do that. I'll just change that to negative numbers and see if it works, okay? I'm going to hit refresh, and you can see that nothing is selected. And the reason for that is because this starting, wherever this is starting, it's starting below where I'm actually finishing it. So if I'm starting it, I'm saying starting on minus 2. So I'm saying that's minus 1, that's minus 2. So that's where it's actually starting, and then it's saying finish at minus 4, so that's minus 1, 2, 3, 4. But you can't have it that way. You've got to have the starting tag above the ending tag. So those numbers need to be swapped around. I need to say minus 4 to minus 2. Okay, so that number needs to be lower than that value. Obviously you're working with negative values here, so if that increases, that means that it's getting lower rather than higher. So I'm going to refresh, and as you can see, it's selecting 6 and 7. And the reason for that is because I said, okay, well, the starting point is minus 4. So I'm saying minus 1, minus 2, minus 3, and minus 4. So that's where it's starting, okay? Then I'm saying finish that on minus 2. So again, that's minus 1, and that's minus 2. So again, it doesn't style the very last one that you select, but everything after that, or sorry, before that, gets styled, okay? And you can change that. You could say starting tag -6, okay? So that's selecting the very, very bottom of the list, alright? Instead of the top down, we're going from the bottom up. And that can be useful in some cases, especially if you've got a massive list and you need to select just a few bottom elements. So think of the slice method as a slice of cake. Okay, that's what I think the JQuery people were getting at there. It's basically just cutting a piece out of a cake, or selecting a range of elements. Okay, really easy and really simple to use. Right, now the next thing we're going to look at is the hover method. Okay, or the event listener, should I say. So I'm going to remove out all this JavaScript, and I'm also going to remove out all this unordered list and get rid of that CSS. Okay, now what I'm going to do is create an image element. So I'm going to open up my tags, say img, then I'm going to create a source attribute, and I'm going to go to the images folder, and I'm going to select the Cartoon Smart logo. Then I'm going to add a width and height as always, and I'm also going to add an ID of Cartoon Smart, okay, like so. Right, and now what I want to do is when I hover over this image, I want to change the opacity of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first create a new statement, and I'm going to select the Cartoon Smart element. Alright, and then I'm going to say dot hover. So when it is hovered over, then I want to run a function. Okay, and we'll end the brackets and end with a semicolon. In between those two opening and closing parentheses, I'm going to space down a couple lines. So this is when it's going to be hovered over. So as soon as the mouse or the user's mouse goes over that picture, it's going to animate this element. Alright. Now what I could do is I could say $, and then I could select the Cartoon Smart element again, but it doesn't really make sense because I've already selected my Cartoon Smart element and I've already added the event listener onto it, and everything that I write inside of here is attached to that event listener, which is attached to that element. Okay, so what I should do is, instead of saying Cartoon Smart every time, I just say this. Okay, and again, you do not put that in quotation marks, otherwise it won't work. You just say this in the bracket, so it means it's selecting that Cartoon Smart element right there. Then we're going to animate the opacity of it, so I'm going to say dot animate. Okay, open brackets, open parentheses, close brackets, and of course, because you started your statement right there, you need to finish it off with a semicolon. Then what I'm going to do is say opacity inside of there, and I will change the opacity to 50% or 0.5. Okay, so that's what it's going to do. That's when the user's mouse goes over this element. So what I'm going to do is preview this in Firefox, and you'll see that when I hover over it, you'll see that it basically changes the opacity of this to 50%. Now what I can do is make a hover off state. So basically what I'm going to do is at the end of that parenthesis, okay, at the end of that function right there, I'm going to say comma, and then I'm going to run another function. So I'm going to say function, open and close brackets, open and close parentheses, and then I'm going to space down a couple lines, okay, and then all I've got to do is make the hover off state. So I want to set the opacity back to 100% again. So again, because we're all still inside of that event listener, we can just say get this element, and then animate that like so, and don't forget your semicolon, and change the opacity to 1. Okay, so that's back at 100%. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh, and as you can see, when I hover over it, it goes down 50%, and I hover off it, as you can see, it goes back to 100%. Okay, so that is a very simple hover effect. Now there is a little bit of a problem here, because if I move my mouse cursor on and off really fast, like so, you'll see that it's still flashing even though my cursor's all the way over here, and this thing is still flashing because I've gone over it so many times. Okay, well, this is definitely not good, and they can easily see that there's a bug in your code. What you need to do is you first need to tell it to stop doing what it's doing and then animate it. So what I'm going to do is, instead of saying animate straight away, I'm going to add in another method saying .stop. Okay, and open and close brackets. Okay, so it's going to stop what it's doing and then it's going to animate this element. Alright, and you want to do the same for the hover off, so I'm going to say .stop and then open and close brackets. Save that, hit refresh, and then when I hover on and off really fast, you'll see that it's stopping what it's doing, and you'll also notice that when I'm away from the object, it's not doing that flashing in, flashing out, and it's not constantly trying to play the animation. It's stopping straight away. Okay, so that's the .stop method. That can come in very handy. Also, you could animate the margins of this again. So I'll just put a comma in there, and I'll animate the left margin by 300 pixels. Let's say left by 300, like so. Okay, and if I save that, and don't forget that you need to set the positioning of this element, because if I refresh this, you'll see that it's just animating the opacity, and that's because we need to get our element, which is Cartoon Smart. So again, I tell CSS to look for the ID of Cartoon Smart, open my parentheses, and I set the position of that element to any of those. I'll just say absolute, it doesn't matter, and then I'll refresh and I hover over it, and as you can see now, it moves across. And the reason why it's just done that is because I've set this, when it hovers off, I've told it to add another 300 pixels on there. I should set that back to 0. Okay, so now if I refresh, you'll see that it goes across and then goes straight back again. Okay, that's made quite an interesting effect. Because don't forget that when you hover over this, as soon as the mouse cursor leaves that image, okay, it's going to stop moving across. So really, you don't want it too much of a margin animation. Let's change that to 60 pixels, and that should fix that little problem right there. Okay, so as you can see, that's a nice smooth animation, and it's stopping what it's doing and then doing whatever animation it wants to do. So when I'm hovering over it, it's stopping what it's doing, and then it's changing the opacity to 50% and changing the left margin over 60 pixels. Then when I'm hovering off, it's stopping what it's doing, and then it's animating the opacity to 100% and animating the margin to 0. Okay, so that is how you use the hover method, and you can do this with tons and tons of stuff. Also, some people ask me, how do you make alert boxes? It's so easy. Okay, so I'm just going to scrap all this, and I'm just going to leave the Cartoon Smart bit in, that statement right there, and I'm going to say .click. Alright, and then again I'm going to open and close my brackets, end with a semicolon to say that my statement's finished. I'm going to run a function inside of there. Okay, and what I'm going to do is say alert, and then I'm going to open and close brackets, end with a semicolon, and in quotation marks I'll just write whatever message I want to display, so I'll say Cartoon Smart or something like that. Save that, refresh, and now when I click on it, you'll see that little box pops up, and you see it says Cartoon Smart in that alert dialog box. So it's really easy to create alert dialog boxes in JQuery, also JavaScript as well. This is pretty much the same thing. So that is very easy. Okay, so now let's move on to making if statements. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this code out right now, and I'm just going to get rid of all this like so. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a couple of anchor tags. And again, they're going to have an ID. I'll say this is link 1 and a href going nowhere. And we'll just say link 1 and that tag. Then I'm going to create another anchor tag, link 2, and give a href going to nowhere, saying link 2, like so. Okay, now what I want to do is display a message when one of these anchor tags is clicked, but I want to do it with an if statement. So if one of them's clicked, show a certain message. If another one is clicked, then show a different message. So this is what is basically an if statement. So what I'm going to do, start off by creating a function. Straight out of the blue, I'm just going to create a function. Okay, but this function is going to be a little bit different to what you've created before, because this function is going to have a name. So what I do is I say, okay, well, I'm going to create a function, then I'm going to define the name. So I'm going to say space, and we'll just call this link check. Okay, then I'm going to open and close brackets and open and close parentheses. Okay, so that is a function that I can call back because I've attached a name to it called link check. Okay, that's the name of this function. Now what I'm going to do is, in between those two opening and closing parentheses, is I'm going to write the if statement. Okay, so I'm going to say if. Okay, then I'm going to open up the brackets. Now in between the brackets it wants to know a condition, and if that condition is true, then it's going to execute what's inside of those two parentheses. So I want to check the condition of the current object, so whatever this is that they're clicking on, or the event listener is triggered, whatever it is that the event listener is triggered on, I'm going to check this ID. So I'm going to check the element's ID is equal to, so I say equals equals, which means the same as, and I want to make sure the ID is the same as, and in quotation marks I'm going to write the ID link 1. Okay, and again, we're not referencing an object, we're checking an element's attribute, so you don't need to put the hash in. Okay, so I'm going to check that whatever element that we've clicked on has an ID of link 1, and then if it does, I'm going to open and close parentheses, and I'm going to space down a couple lines, and then in between those two parentheses, if that condition is true, then we can tell it to display a message. Okay, so I'm going to create a variable. I'll say, okay, call this variable HTML, $HTML, and then I'll create a paragraph element, HTML element, and then what I'm going to write is link 1 has been clicked. And then I'm going to attach that variable to the body tag so that we can see it. So I'm going to say $HTML, which is the name of the variable. So I'm calling back the variable with its name. Okay, very important, because we're going to be calling back our function with its name. So I'm going to say, okay, we'll get HTML, and then I'm going to say .append to. Okay, and then you're going to append that to the body element. Okay, and I'm going to end with a semicolon. So I'm going to save that, and I'm just going to preview that in the browser, like so. And as you can see, when I click link 1, nothing happens, and when I click link 2, nothing happens. And the reason for that is because, yes, we've created a function with an if statement in there. However, we haven't called it back, so this function is not running at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off a new statement outside of this function. Okay, that is the function right there, so I can minimize that. And then I'm going to say, okay, well, get link 1. Whoops. Put that hash in there. So this statement is going to get the element with the ID of link 1. Wait until it's clicked. And then normally what you do here is you'd open and close your brackets, obviously end with your semicolon. and you'd write, you know, function, you know, like so, okay? But we don't want to do it this time. What we want to do is call back this function, okay? So what I need to do is simply copy the name of the function and paste it in between those two brackets instead of writing function, like so, okay? So that's going to call back that function. It's going to run that function on this element. And that's why you have to use this, okay? You can't say a specific element as such in this example. I mean, you could, but the reason is we want to check the ID of the current element that they're clicking on, okay? So it's very important that you remember that. So what this statement is going to do is going to check to see if whatever element, which obviously we're looking at this element at the moment, and checking to see if the ID is link1, and then we're going to display a message saying link1 has been clicked. So I'm going to save that, and I'm going to refresh and click on link1, and now you can see that the paragraph link1 has been clicked, okay? Now what I also could do is make an else condition. Okay, so if this condition is not true, then I can say else if the condition is false. So all I have to do is, again, that's my if statement. So I want to say else. If it's not clicked, then I'm going to open and close parentheses, space down a couple lines, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable, and we'll call this none. And create another paragraph, okay? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a paragraph inside of there, and we'll say no, element with the ID of link1 has not been clicked. Okay, so then the user knows that they haven't clicked on an element with the ID of 1, and so I need to display that again. So I call back my variable by typing in the variable name, and then I say dot append to, and then I'm going to append to the body again, like so. So what's going to happen if I really run through this quickly? I'm creating a function, and I'm giving that function a name. And then what I'm going to do is I'm creating an if statement, and it's going to check whichever element you attach this function to. So that's what this means, okay? Whatever you attach this function to, so at the moment I'm attaching this function to link1, so it's going to check this element, so it's that element right there, whatever you're attaching that function onto, and it's going to check the ID of that element, and then I'm going to make sure that the ID is equal to or the same as or has the value of link1, okay? If it matches, if that statement is true, then it's going to create basically a paragraph and display that on the page saying link1 has been clicked. If it doesn't, if that condition is false, then it's going to display a paragraph that says it hasn't been clicked and a different element has been clicked. Then I'm going to say none, and then I'm going to say append to body. Now at the moment we've only called back this function onto link1, so no matter which element I click, even if I was to, you know, save that and refresh, even if I was to click link 2, I still wouldn't get, you know, sorry you haven't clicked on link 1, because I haven't called back the function on link 2, okay? So I have to say, again, go down a couple lines, and I'm going to say, okay, this time select link 2 and call back that function, which is link check, okay? That's the name of the function. Like so, okay? And so if I save that and refresh now, we can click on link 2, and now you can see element with the ID of link 1 has not been clicked. And that's because what it's doing is we're attaching that function. That function has got an if statement in. That if statement is saying if the current object that you've attached the function onto, if that event listener is true, then it's going to run that function. That function is then going to check to see if the ID of the element, okay, is set to link 1. If that's true, then it's going to display a message. If it isn't, which in this case it isn't, the ID of this element is set to link 2, we're going to say, sorry, but you didn't click on link 1. So it's very easy to do, and we're just basically then appending those variables to the body element, okay? So you've learnt lots of useful things, how to select elements, and also with the if statements you can check to see if a condition is true, okay? So just as a quick marker, what we're going to do is we're going to go back and refresh this, and we're going to just click on link 1 and then click on link 2, and you can see that it's creating both these elements. Maybe that's something that you don't want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually put an ID on these paragraphs. So I'm going to say ID is equal to, and then we'll say these are equal to something like 1 and 2. Okay, so I'm going to add an ID of 2 in there, okay? And so what I'm going to do now is say, okay, well, if this condition is true, it's going to run this function. And let's say that they've already clicked on link 2 and it says, sorry, you know, this element has been clicked. Then I need to remove this paragraph with an ID of 2 in there, okay? So what I need to do is go down a line and say, first, get all the elements with an ID of 2 in them, and simply remove that from the page. And I'm just going to do the same for the else statement. So let's say they've already clicked on paragraph 1 and they've got that message, and then they click on the second one. Well, we want to get rid of that first paragraph once they've done that. So I'm going to say again, open my $sign up. I'm going to say get any element with the ID of 1, and then I'm going to remove that. Okay, open and close brackets, ends with a semicolon. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to hit refresh. I'm going to say link 1. Okay, link 1 has been clicked. Then I'm going to say link 2. Then you can see it instantly removes that element from the page. Okay, straight away. So we don't get multiple messages flashing up. So that's just a little side note in there, but it just shows you that you can do anything you want in there, and obviously you can write statements. That's fairly obvious. And you can write, again, you could write another if statement inside of this function. Okay, you don't just have to have one if statement. You could say, well, first we'll create a third link. That's best. So I'm going to copy that, paste it below, and we'll say this one is link 3. And we'll change that to link 3. Like so. And then I'm going to save that, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert that else into an if statement on its own. So I'm going to say if, and then don't forget that if you're creating a new if statement, you have to have a condition. So I'm going to check to see if this element has an ID of link 1, oh sorry, 2 should I say, because we're already checking for link 1, so that's what that's going to happen if that condition is true. If the element has an ID of link 2, then it's going to run that code right there. And then what I'm going to do is add in another if statement, and that if statement is going to check whether the ID of this element is equal to link 3. Okay, and then I'm going to open and close brackets and just take it down a couple of lines. Okay, so if this condition is true, then anything in between those two parentheses is executed as always. Okay, so now I've got no else conditions on the if statement. We've only got if statement, so this if statement is looking to see if link 1 is clicked, this if statement is seeing if link 2 is clicked, and this if statement is seeing if link 3 is clicked. So what I'm going to do now is create a variable. So I'm going to say var, that's variable. Then I'm going to say $third. Alright, this is the third one. and I'm going to say create a paragraph that says, oops, like so. I'm going to create a paragraph with an ID of third para, standing for paragraph, and then I'm going to end that paragraph tag, and inside of that paragraph tag I'm going to say link with ID of link 3 has been clicked. And I'll change this one to say you must have clicked link 2. Okay, so now we've got 3 if statements. Okay, so this one's checking to see if the ID is link 1, this one's checking to see if the ID is link 2, and this one's checking to see if the link is 3. Then all we have to do is append that to the body tag. So again, I'm going to call back the variable, say append to, and then I'm going to append it to the body tag. Okay, so I'm going to save that, and I'm going to refresh or preview in the browser, and you'll be able to see when I click link 1, it says link 1 has been clicked. You must have clicked link 2. Oops, forgot to put a space in there. Very, very important. Okay, so I click link 1. Link 1 has been clicked. You must have clicked link 2, and now I click link 3. It says link with the ID of link 3 has been clicked. Now again, we've got this situation where it's showing the older message, so what I want to do is tell it to remove. Okay, if this is link 3 that's going to be clicked, I want to remove paragraph 1 and paragraph 2 because they have no relevance. So I'm going to say get 1, and then I'm going to remove that, and then I'm also going to say 2, I'm going to remove that like so, and then what I'm going to do is, because I click on link 1, I want to get rid of the the second paragraph 2, and I want to get rid of the third paragraph. I'll just change that back to third like that. Okay, so I'm going to say remove the third paragraph from the page. Now I'm going to I'm just going to copy that, and obviously I want to, when I click link 2, it wants to get rid of paragraph 1 and paragraph 3, okay, but not its own paragraph. That's obviously what it's creating. Okay, so I save that, I refresh, I say link 1 has been clicked, you must have clicked link 2, and you must have clicked the link 3. Okay, and you can see that now it's only displaying one message. Okay, so that is basically using multiple if statements inside of one function, and then all you have to do is call that function back on an element. Okay, so instead of writing that function in every single one and telling it to do something, we can make a function, and then we can simply call back on that function at a later time. So you've just learned how to call back functions and how to do if statements, so double bonus. So in the next tutorial, you're going to be looking at some cool add-ons for JQuery and how you can play around with those. So check out the next tutorial.